We've heard some great presentations already this morning. I want to pick up on a couple of things that were said. Tara showed a matrix of just some of the issues that consumers are thinking about when they're making their choices. Were there 9 or 12 or 15 or 20 or whatever bubbles there of issues that people think about when they're making choices around beef? And I look at that and, of course, the simple conclusion is it's complicated. But then Nicole started with sharing an anecdote from yesterday about Chuggask saying it was a 3-year process to try to roll out the ideas that had been developed in the Innovation Centre, in labs, etc. And of course there's years, months, years in getting those to the point of proving the case. And 3 years I thought might have been a bit ambitious in terms of some other parts of the world to sort of roll out best practice onto farm. I feel that when I put those two things together, the complication of the consumer and the sort of time frame that we're talking about to change the way that we're working, the thing that to me is missing is the sense of urgency. It's not easy. I mean, we wouldn't be here if we all thought it was easy. There'd be no reason to come together. There'd be no reason for partnerships if it was easy. But it's not easy. But we're in a situation in the world, particularly around beef, where we have a whole range of issues that are coming at us. And, you know, it's up to us whether we look at those issues and get frightened and get defensive, or whether we look at those issues and get excited and see the opportunity in the change that is going to be expected of us. And to me, the difference between those two perspectives is leadership. Who are the people, who are the organisations, who are the companies, who are the farmers that are setting the direction, that are giving us the confidence to look at those issues and to flip them upside down and say, you know, that's not a threat, that's an opportunity for all of us. I think we don't have enough. We've got leaders, for sure. I think we need more. I think there are rewards for leaders. And I hope that the process that we're all a part of here is going to give others the opportunity, give others the sense of urgency, give others the confidence to step up and say, you know what, I'm going to lead. I'm keen to help set that direction and to benefit the whole of the industry in the process. And you know what? Help to shape the future of this industry that plays to our strengths. I've already set the scene, but, you know, let's be confident when we start. We've got a great product. We should all be proud of that. And people are going to keep eating it. Lots of people are going to keep eating beef. But the market is changing. It's been changing for a while, and you know what? It just gets worse in terms of the issues that we need to deal with, the number of them, the complexity of them, and the way that that's changing. We need to get ready for more change. That's the thing that we need to be ready for. But, you know, the idea of leadership is to really set the direction, shape the future, set our destiny in ways that really help us as an industry, play to the strengths of individual companies, individual farmers, processors, input companies, and in the retail world as well. Let me start then by going into a little bit about the beef production outlook. Yes, we publish research, we have views on where we think the market's going, and it's gratifying to see that at least half a dozen people put up their hand before to say that they have a look at our reports. I do hope you're all clients. Our views, our preliminary views, we're just in the process of refining these. This top line here is the global total of beef production. We've got 2019 on the right-hand side there, our view. We see beef production globally going up a couple of percentage points next year. And you see that this is the continuation of a couple of years of growth that we've had. So more growth ahead. And if you look into some of the markets, and I've just pulled out a couple of them here, it's really North America and South America that are driving progress in terms of expanding production. But of course, this is the easy bit. From an economics point of view, you can think about the future in numbers and put them up on the chart there. I think the real world is about what are the issues that are shaping that. And let me touch on 4 issues that are driving it. I think the first thing, and the thing that we should all be grateful for at the moment, is consumer confidence is pretty high in most parts of the world at the moment. And generally, we know that that's a good thing for beef consumption. The second point which flows from this is that actually, you know, we may be reaching a point of protein oversupply in a couple of markets. So we need that consumer confidence to stay there. And the protein oversupply is right across the species. Poultry, pork in particular, we see growing quite strongly as well. And it's something for us to just be aware of. I don't know how many of you follow African swine fever. It's something that affects the pork industry, obviously, but the nature of the outbreaks in China at the moment, the nature of the outbreaks in parts of Europe at the moment, have got us quite worried about the implications for global trade in pork. And under certain scenarios of what could happen in China, we think that there's going to be impacts on both on seafood, on beef, and on poultry production and trade as well. And finally, if you think about the near-term outlook, we're quite conscious of 2 cost of production issues which are starting to weigh in some markets. Feed prices in some markets have been going up 10, 20% in some markets this year, and for some feed commodities they look like they're going to go a little bit further up as well, corn in particular next year. And labour costs, if anyone got into Ireland over the weekend, they might have seen an article in the Irish papers over the weekend talking about shortage of farm labour here in parts of Ireland. It's not an Irish phenomenon, it's a phenomenon that many of us are facing in our markets, that labour costs are rising. If I look further ahead though, and the detail here is not so important other than a couple of points that I'll make for you. This is a sort of 10-year view on where we see production going. I think generally we see production rising, we see consumption rising. The most important markets for me are here in Southeast Asia, where we're going to see a structural deficit between production is going to be below consumption over the next 10 years. And also in China up here, again, the numbers are different to ASEAN, but again you see consumption is rising and production can't keep up with that. So these are the kind of key regions in Asia that are going to keep importing beef. And for many of us, Ireland exporting 90% of the food it produces, but in other countries as well, focused on trade. It's very important for us to understand where trade opportunities are going to be in the future. Briefly, a couple of issues that impact that longer term outlook. And of course, we're all here to talk about sustainability, but without explicitly going into sustainability, let's talk about trade flow disruptions and the sort of rise of protectionism. Trade is important in our industry, vitally important for most people in the room, and yet the geopolitical climate seems to be backing away from globalisation. And we should take that pushback on globalisation quite seriously. The future of trade is not the last 10 years repeated. Secondly, consumer preferences. I referred already to the point that Tara made. Consumer preferences and the competitive responses to those preferences in the retail landscape, food service companies, food retail companies. These are huge issues which are going to shape the future for our industry. The rise of alternative proteins. I don't know how many of you follow the United Nations Environment Programme's Leadership Awards, but 2 companies in alternative proteins were recently given sort of global leadership awards. They refer to animal agriculture driving the world to the verge of catastrophe. Alternative proteins is not just a sort of competition for the centre of the plate. The rise of alternative proteins is really about how people think about what they're eating and where that comes from. And again, I think this is an issue that we need to take very seriously. Action on greenhouse gas emissions. Nicole referred to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's special report released earlier this week. Again, a point about leadership. We can look at the pathways there and look at what needs to happen, what they say needs to happen on methane emissions, and we can look at that and be quite confronted by the reductions required. Nicola showed a slide there showing how easy it could be to get rid of the worst performing farms and to bring those back towards the average and the impact that that could make. But in the same report, they also talked about the importance of carbon dioxide removals from the atmosphere. And the beef supply chain has a huge influence on land management in many parts of the world. So I think there's also opportunities in this question around the future of greenhouse gas emissions, not just threats for us. And technology, how technology is integrated into production systems, into processing systems, and how it links up the supply chain as well, is a huge issue for us that will shape the outlook over the long term. But make no mistake, it's a busy world. It's an unpredictable world. The changes that we see are happening faster. It feels harder to judge the future than it has in the past. I want to share with you quickly 3 stories from maybe somewhat random parts of the world, but 3 that I think are all relevant as we think about the leadership, dividend and sustainable beef. The first, for most people in the room, and I know I had a quick flick through the app before, so maybe I'm embarrassing a few people, I hope not. IKEA for most people is a furniture company, right? I think we'd probably mostly agree. You get the Allen key out and you hope that you've got fewer than 10 spare bits at the end once you've made the piece of furniture. That's success. Fewer than 10, you know you've made a mistake. More than 10, well, it's probably not standing up. But IKEA is also generating 5+% of its revenues from food sold in store and food to take home. And its iconic product, for anyone who hasn't been to an IKEA store, is the Swedish meatball. IKEA is also a leader on sustainability, makes very clear commitments and strong statements about how it sees itself as part of the circular economy of the future, for example, going beyond sustainability, if you like. And so I find it challenging when a company like IKEA that's committed to sustainability brings out vegetable-based meatballs, brings out vegetable hot dogs as its response to sustainability on beef. Now, I don't think that's the only thing that IKEA is going to do. I certainly hope it's not. But, you know, there are potential leaders in beef sustainability all around the world. I invite us all to be open-minded about who they are, which industries they're sitting in at the moment, and to embrace them, to turn them into champions, to make sure that the actions that they are taking play to our strengths. And I think here's an example, and I would love to see later this year, next year, IKEA as one of the companies making a strong commitment to the future of certified sustainable beef, for example. Secondly, this is an egg. Okay, that bit's obvious. But what's unusual about this egg is that the hens that have laid the egg have been fed a diet which includes live insect larvae. Now, anyone who's looked into insect-based proteins will know that this is a very exciting area and also one that's fraught with challenge, fraught with barrier, fraught with all manner of problems for us to get our heads around. And yet one company, Protex, which is involved in insects, has found a way to not just overcome those barriers, but to create a product which is successful in the market. It's found a retail partner in the Netherlands that will sell those eggs. Those eggs are more expensive, sure. Not much, about 5% more expensive than organic eggs. About 40% more expensive than a standard egg. But, you know, there's so many types of eggs on the shelf, it's hard to know which is which. The point here about a company like this is that leadership requires you to look through that range of issues and to spot the pathway to opportunity, to overcome those barriers, to look at those issues from a glass half full perspective and say, you know what, let's find a way to make it happen. Will consumers pay more? Sure, we know that they will. Some consumers will pay more. No one would eat beef if price was the only thing that was important to you in your choice of animal protein. It's not about whether you pay more. It's about finding the solution. Working together, looking at the issues as potential opportunities and building the solution. I think they've done a great job with that. Thirdly, let me talk about beer. Alcohol in general, particularly in the Western world, has an image problem. Lots of social issues associated with alcohol. This company, Heineken, has said, you know what? We're going to own that problem. We're going to make sure that as regulators and as society thinks that drinking less alcohol is a good idea, that we are the number one choice. The market may be shrinking, but we're going to make sure that we continue to capture a growing share of a shrinking market. Let me show you just briefly a bit about how they talk about...
Young people have been invited to drink in moderation in many different ways. But responsible drinking has never become a topic to talk about and to share. Heineken therefore decided to not create another responsible drinking campaign, but to engage people in a social responsibility conversation about all the opportunities not to miss when on a night out.
You get the idea. You know, let's make drinking in moderation a good thing. And let's position ourselves as Heineken as the solution to drinking in moderation. Part of it is sponsorship of Formula One, which is not an industry which is seen as kind of responsible in for many people, but they're advertising around Formula One, when you drive, never drink. This responsibility market is something they want to own. They want to own the problem and be the solution. And I think that's a very powerful concept. It's a sort of concept that leaders gravitate towards. That idea that, yep, there are problems and let's be honest about them, but let's focus not so much on the problems, but let's focus on the opportunities because we're the solution provider. And I think in Heineken's case, I'm not going to say it's the world's best company, the most successful company, but they're looking at the issues in front of them and they're turning them into an opportunity by focusing on the solution. Let's shift the audience's attention away from the problem and get them thinking about the solution. So, in this fast world, in this changing world, in this unpredictable world, who shapes our destiny as a beef industry? I say leaders do that. Leaders shape the future. They give us the confidence to take that glass half full perspective, see the issues, see the problems, and flip them and turn them into opportunities. And leaders have the ability to draw others in, to build the partnerships that we need to be successful, to build the networks, to build the supply chains, which are part of the future here. That's what leaders do. I think the leadership dividend is also clear and compelling. Yes, those are nice things to say, but what's in it for me as a leader? It's not just about shaping the future. And here I think there are 4 areas where businesses always invest. They invest to manage risk. And leaders are good at this. The risk of regulations moving ahead of your business, perhaps. They invest to increase efficiency. To think of methane as a waste which needs to be turned into less of a waste to improve our efficiency, for example. Leadership brings with it the ability to maintain or grow access to markets, engaging with consumers in deeper ways, in more thoughtful ways. In looking at that chart that Tara put up before with the various issues that consumers are thinking about, and to get them to focus, to own that space, to get them to focus on what you're doing. Accessing new markets, engaging with consumers. And finally, and maybe this is an obvious point because I happen to work at a bank, but we as a bank face pressure from regulators to say we need to think about a whole range of issues that banks in the past haven't thought about. But as an industry, I start to see investors looking at where they're placing their money and why. I start to see activist shareholders putting forward resolutions for annual general meetings. I see analysts looking at protein rankings. Who's doing the right thing? And in the future, part of the leadership dividend is also going to be retaining access to capital. I think this leadership case is clear. I think there's a compelling case for more people to step up. And when in this industry we see leaders, we should embrace them. We should support them. We should listen to them. And we should follow them. Thank you.